Hey kids, Goodly Grandparents here. At 1:45 a.m. on Saturday, October 13th, 2018, my father passed away. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes and talk with you about what I remember, what we remember from my father. So let's do that. Okay, okay, stop. All right. So, as I said, I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about my father, some of our memories. So, Goodly Grandma, what were some of your favorite qualities about my father?
Well, I found him to be someone that was very devoted to family, and he just loved his family. He'd do anything for them. And he's very kind. At first I thought he was a little gruff, so it kind of reminds me of a teddy bear. But once I got to know him, I realized what a softie he really was.
No, I agree. He was a very kind and generous man, in spite of his gruff facade that he would put on. He was always playing tough guy, but I think he had a good heart. He always wanted to help people. He was a family man, for sure. He loved my mother, I think, more than I ever really understood until my mother died. My mother passed away, I think, in the year 1999, I think. Is that right? 1999.
So.
She died suddenly from cancer. So she, within just a few weeks of the diagnosis, she had passed. Now, I think my father always expected that he would die first. He had high blood pressure. He had a lot of stress. He lived a fairly risky lifestyle. He was always off doing dangerous things. So I think he just always assumed that he would die first and never really had a plan for life without my mother. So when she passed, that truly devastated him. I really didn't understand the depths of love that he had for her until she passed. So that was a different side of my father that I had not seen before. He was dedicated to his family. He saw himself as the protector and the provider of the family, and those were two functions that he performed very well. He was always concerned about the protection of his family. He took that seriously. He always would carry a firearm with him just in case something unexpected came up, and he practiced diligently with it. He was a firearms enthusiast, but it was not just for fun. I think although he did enjoy it, I think it was also with the purpose of being a provider, or I'm sorry, a protector for the family, but he was also a provider of the family. He also took that role seriously. He worked hard. He worked as an electrical contractor, and he really worked hard at becoming the best he could be in his profession. As a young man, he worked for his father as an electrician. He got his master electrician license at a young age. I understand that when he got his master electrician license, he was the youngest person ever in the state at that time to receive that master designation. So he was a very smart, intelligent, and dedicated man, a good electrician, a good mechanic. But that, again, that wasn't just as a matter of pride, but he did that so that he could provide for his family. So I never felt, as a child growing up, that I wasn't safe or that there wouldn't be the necessities of life around. We were never rich, but we always had what we needed, and there was never a concern that we couldn't earn a living. So I thank my father for that. So, Goodly Grandma, what are your favorite memories of my dad?
Well, I really liked it when we were able to get together with him for Thanksgiving. And one year when we lived in Henderson, we were able to have your mom and him and your grandma and grandpa and my mom.
That was Grandma and Grandpa Logan.
Mm-hmm. And my mom and Dave came, and it was just so nice to be together because you never know when that'll happen again. So it was a very special memory for me.
That was a good memory. My dad was never very comfortable in social situations, but I thought he was very sweet because he always tried. He never balked from it. You could tell he didn't enjoy getting around groups of people. He was, I think, socially awkward in those types of situations, but he always tried, and I thought that was a nice quality, that he would work so hard to make other people feel comfortable even when he didn't feel comfortable himself.
And I never realized that, so he did a good job.
Oh, good job. Okay. That's because you're accustomed to socially awkward people. She married one. I have just a ton of memories and stories about my father. Of course, I grew up with him. My favorite memories are him. He was a great teacher. He would teach me skills of life. He, for example, as an electrician, he would bring me on his job sites. Early on, as a young boy, I would go to his job sites and I would clean up, I would sweep up job sites, I would pick up copper wire scraps, and he would let me keep that wire and strip it out. So I had a little business growing up of collecting copper, stripping off the plastic, and then selling that copper to earn some money. So he taught me skills of business. And he also, as I was growing up, would teach me the trade of being an electrician. So by the time I left for college, I was a fairly decent electrician and would work on many of his jobs for him. So I knew him both as a father, but also as a boss. And we spent many hours around the dinner table talking about business. And that's something that I value in life and had influenced me strongly later in life. He was also a great hunter. My father grew up, raised for a good part of his life from his grandparents in the mountains of Colorado. And in I guess in the summers or the falls, he would go out and work on a deer ranch as a guide. So he would guide hunters up into the mountains and help them find the game, the deer that they were hunting for. These were mule deer. I do remember one time hunting with my father. We were on horseback and we heard some shots coming from another ridge, from the other side of a ridge across the way. And so my father just kind of paused and looked around and tested the wind, and he found a little spot, and we sat down on a log, and he just pointed out to a ridge on the other side of the valley and two trees, and he told me just to keep my eye in between those two trees. And maybe, 20 minutes later, a small herd of deer ran up over that ridge right between those two trees. So that was the level of skill he had as a deer hunter. He was outstanding and tried to teach me his skill. I never was the avid hunter that he was, but I appreciated his desire to pass on those skills to his son, and I'll treasure those memories. So my dad had a great sense of humor and was a master storyteller as well. He told a lot of stories. Do you remember any stories? Do you have a favorite story that my dad told?
I remember a story that you told me that he told to you, and then he also repeated it a few times. But I really liked it because it taught a really good lesson. And he made a very wise decision that day. And he was with a group of his friends, and some drugs were passed around. And he didn't take it. And he watched what it did to his friends and how it altered their minds and affected their bodies. And he realized how bad that was. And it's just a very wise decision that he made. Don't do drugs.
That's true. I do remember that story. That was a lesson to me, not to do drugs, and I never did. I never tried any drugs, even though I probably had more exposure to them than he did, and probably not nearly as much as you, goodly children and goodly grandchildren, will have in your lives. But take that as a good lesson from my dad. Grandpa or great-grandpa, don't do drugs. Now, with that said, most of his stories were a little more entertaining than that one. He told a lot of stories. He told stories about his time growing up in Colorado. He told a lot of stories about his work, he told a lot of stories about his grandfather and grandmother, Grandma and Grandpa Bazookas. And through his stories, you could tell he had a great love for them. I have a lot of memories of my Grandma Bazookas. I just really have one memory of my Grandpa Bazookas, who died when I was, I don't know how old, but quite young, 3 or 4 years old.
So this is your great grandpa.
That's right, my great grandpa Bazookas. Thank you. But most of his stories were entertaining. The thing I love most about his stories is he would tell them over and over and over again. I think he told them more to entertain himself than to entertain others. But the most entertaining thing about his stories was how they would evolve over time. So his stories were never quite the same twice, and they always got just a little bit better every time he told them. So I think that's one of the things that made him a great storyteller, is they weren't necessarily too rooted in truth, and that made them more fun, I thought. But they always had a good moral, or at least a funny ending. So I always appreciated listening to his stories. In fact, growing up, he told a lot of stories about, as a young man just married to Mom, he worked in a pet store. And I tell you, of all of his stories, probably a third to a half of all the stories he told were about I think it was a 6-month period he worked in a pet store. But he just loved animals. He loved working in that pet store. And I think that influenced me as well. He told a lot of stories about growing up as a cowboy, and that influenced me. And of course, I heard a lot of stories about his work in the construction trade. Some of them were his frustrations with regulators, or his frustrations with employees, or just funny stories he would tell. So I think those stories had more of an impact on me than just entertainment, because I kind of look back on his legacy of stories, and then I see how that's had an impact on my life. He told stories about working in a pet store. He told stories about working in construction. He told stories about being a cowboy. And you might note that I owned a pet store, I worked in construction, and most recently I bought a farm and I have cows, so I'm now a cowboy. So I'm basically living my life in reverse of his. So I can see that his stories probably did have an impact on me, since I seem to be patterning my life on his. Any other stories?
Well, I just really loved how the girls and I had a great experience when we moved to Las Vegas, because we were able to live with them for a few months while our house was being built, and we were able to attend church with them, and it was just a happy time, a happy memory. And also Brad and I were able to go to the temple with both of them on a War Temple night, so that was special.
That was nice, and it was a great experience too. How long did we live with them? A month?
I think it was like 4 months.
4 months. Wow, it
At
seems like a
least.
month. I must have been having a good time. I was working out of town at the time, so for me it was probably closer to a month. But it was nice for our daughters to have a chance to get to know their grandparents at that level, and we really appreciate their hospitality, allowing us to come and invade their home while ours was being built in Las Vegas. So that was nice. It was also other fun stories about my dad was, he loved animals, especially dogs, and my entire life we always had dogs. But I do remember as a boy, we would go up to visit my grandma and grandpa Kramer, and they had poodles. And I remember one time when I think Grandma or Grandpa Kramer fed their poodles ice cream. And my father thought that was the most ridiculous thing he had ever seen. He was just all the way home as we drove down from St. George. That was before the gorge, so it took a lot longer to drive down. But he was just thought that was so ridiculous that they would feed their poodles ice cream. And I remember later in life, Mom and Dad feeding their poodles ice cream. So a little bit of karma. Dad loved animals. After my mom passed, he was especially close to his dogs. He always had someone or something to take care of, and I think that was a defining characteristic of him. He had a lot of love to give, and when my mom passed, he expressed a lot of that love to his dogs. His dogs were really, really special to him. And I also saw that when he had Alzheimer's, we really just couldn't care for him after a while, and he needed to go into a memory care center. And when he was in there, he found a girlfriend and just took care of her. He always needed somebody to protect and to take care of. So he found a girlfriend in the memory care center. I think half the time he mistook her for a mom, but regardless, he always found someone or something to take care of. So I think even as he started to lose his memory, lose his grip on reality, that characteristic of being a caretaker and a protector even came through then. So that was kind of sweet. All right, Goodly Grandma is crying. So, anything else? Okay, let's pause for a minute while we both regain our composure. We'll be back. And we're back. So, we just wanted to spend a little bit of time with you, our children and grandchildren, and just reminisce a little bit about my dad. And I guess in conclusion, we'd just like to share my testimony. Hold on, let's start over.
That families can be together forever?
Yes, the families can be together forever. That through the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, we know that we're here on this earth for a reason. And part of that reason is to learn to love each other, and to treat each other well. And I think those are great lessons that I learned from my father. He loved my mother, and that's perhaps the best thing that any father can do for his family, is to love their mother. So I appreciate that from him. And I do know that we will be together again in the next life. I miss my father already. I miss my mother, but I know it's just for a short time that we'll be together again. And we'll be together as well as eternal families, and we'll see you in the next life as well when the time comes. So I just want to express all my love and appreciation to my children and grandchildren. We love you deeply. Anything you'd like to add?